Joseph Stalin. He was as powerful and unprincipled as any dictator in history.
Hey there guys, what's going on and welcome back to our channel. Most of us living normal lives often wish to have a carefree time as we breathe. Little do we know that there live some humans with magnificent lifestyles and wealth who have completed our dreams in their lives. Today, we'll be looking into the richest of the rich with the top 10 richest people in history. Number 10, Genghis Khan. Living in the 12th century with uncountable wealth, Genghis Khan is undoubtedly one of the most successful military leaders of all time. As the leader of the Mongol Empire, which at its height stretched from China to Europe, he controlled the largest known empire in history. However, despite his great power, scholars say Genghis never showed off his wealth. On the opposite, Khan's generosity was key to his influence,
amounting to hundreds of trillions of dollars. Between 1206 and 1227, he led his armies on a brutal assault of all of his neighboring kingdoms.
Number 9, Jeffrey Bezos. Bezos' wealth surpassed $100 billion for the first time on November 24, 2017, and he was formally designated the wealthiest person in the world by Forbes on March 6, 2011, with a net worth of $112 billion. As an American billionaire on the Forbes Wealth Index, he is named the richest man in modern history after his net worth increased to $150 billion in July 2018, and he might just become the first trillionaire in modern times as we speak now.
Is so rich that even Bill Gates and Elon Musk look like poor schmucks in comparison. The pandemic has made Bezos even richer.
Number 8, Alan Rufus, aka Alan the Red. The nephew of William the Conqueror, Rufus joined his uncle in the Norman conquest in the 11th century AD. He was successful alongside his uncle in their ventures. He died whilst living a short life of 53 years with 11,000 pounds, according to Philip Beresford and Bill Rubenstein, authors of The Richest of the Rich, which they amounted to 7% of England's GDP at the time. That would amount to $194 billion today.
66 to help his uncle, William the Bastard, in the Norman conquest of England.
Number 7, John D. Rockefeller. Rockefeller began investing in the petroleum industry in 1863, and by 1880, his Standard Oil Company controlled 90% of American oil production. According to his obituary, Rockefeller was valued at about $1.5 billion based on a 1918 federal income tax return, and estimates of his overall fortune were equivalent to almost 2% of U.S. economic output that year, according to data compiled by Measuring Worth. The U.S. did not keep official records on national income until 1932. The same economic share in 2019 would be equivalent to $341 billion as a whole, making him the second most rich American in history.
He made his money in oil refining, and the Standard Oil Trust that he founded controlled 90% of the supply of oil in the United States. He revolutionized.
Number 6, Andrew Carnegie. Living in the same years as Rockefeller, Andrew is always forgotten when discussing the rich people. Rockefeller gets all the press and accountability of being the richest American, but Andrew Carnegie may be the richest American of all time. The Scottish immigrant sold his company, U.S. Steel, to J.P. Morgan for $480 million in 1901. That sum equates to slightly over 2.1% of U.S. GDP at the time, giving Carnegie economic power equivalent to a massive $372 billion in 2019.
Industrialist and philanthropist Andrew Carnegie was born in Scotland, the son of a handloom weaver. At the age of 13, he moved to America and worked a series of telegraph.
Number 5, Joseph Stalin. Stalin is an uncommon figure in modern economic history due to his dictatorship rule with absolute power. He also controlled one of the largest economies in the world. While it is virtually impossible to separate Stalin's wealth from the wealth of the Soviet Union, his unique combination of economic greatness and complete control of the USSR led multiple economists to nominate him as one of the richest people of all time. You can easily understand their logic. Data from the OECD shows that in 1950, 3 years before Stalin's death, the USSR made up roughly 9.5% of global economic output. As of 2019, that level of production would be equivalent to nearly a gigantic $7.5 trillion.
Joseph Stalin. He was as powerful and unprincipled as any dictator in history.
Number 4. Akbar. The greatest Mughal emperor of India, Akbar, controlled an enormous empire that filled up for about 1/4 of global economic output. Fortune's Chris Matthews cites the late economic historian Angus Maddison, who speculates India's GDP per capita under Akbar was comparable to Elizabethan England, but with a ruling class whose extravagant lifestyle surpassed that of the European society. Command over 25% of the global economy in the modern era would round up to a massive $31 trillion.
Size, power, and influence over this vast empire because he created a centralized system of administration that ensured military, political, cultural, and economic dominance.
Number 3. Emperor Shenzong. China's Song Dynasty, 1960 to 1279, was one of the most economically powerful empires of all time. According to Professor Ronald A. Edwards, a Chinese economic historian of the Song Dynasty at Hong Kong University, the nation accounted for between 25% and 30% of the world's economic output during its peak, which could be summed up to a gigantic $38 trillion.
For an estimated 30% of the world's GDP during the peaceful prosperity and primary abundance eras, a new economic and social program was instituted.
Number 2. Augustus Caesar. The only person on our list who lived in the BC era. Not only was Augustus Caesar in charge of an empire that accounted for 25% to 30% of the world's economic output, but according to Stanford history professor Ian Morris, Augustus at one point held personal wealth equivalent to 1/5 of his empire's economy. That amount would be equal to $4.6 trillion in 2021. For a while, Morris adds, Augustus personally owned all of Egypt. It's hard to come near that.
Julius Caesar. Augustus Caesar was the master of political and military intrigue, and in 27 BC appointed himself the first emperor of the Roman.
Number 1. Mansa Musa. Mansa Musa, the king of Timbuktu, is referred to as the wealthiest person known in history. According to Ferrum College history professor Richard Smith, Musa's West African kingdom was likely the largest producer of gold in the world, which is at a time when gold was especially in high demand. Just how rich was he? There's no chance to put an accurate value on his wealth. Records are rare, if non-existent, and sources describe the king's riches in terms that are impossible for our time. Some tales of his pilgrimage to Mecca, during which Musa's spending was so lavish that it caused a currency crisis in Egypt. Smith said that 1 year of Malian gold production probably generated about a ton. Others said Musa's army consisted of 200,000 men, including 40,000 archers, troop members. Even modern superpowers would have a rough time bringing to the field. So do give us your thoughts on some of these richest people in the comments section below. And while you're at it, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel, as well as hit that bell icon to be notified of more content such as this in the future. And with that, I'll be catching you guys later in another video. Bye now.